Well, ladies and gentlemen, you guys loved the past two Fear and Hunger videos, so I, the Mothmaker, am back with more content. This time, it's all about the contestants of Fear and Hunger Termina, and I'll even dive into a little bit of the Moon Scorch forms of each contestant. And I'm not one to waste any more of your time. Let's start with the first contestant. Now, not much is said about Marco's lore throughout the game, except in his specific intro, because typically Marco is a quiet and reserved character. But we do know that his story starts at a young age, with him losing his parents. He does not remember what happened to them, but from that point on, he and his sister had to fend for themselves. At only 10 years old, Marco had to find a way to make a living. Throughout his childhood, Marco was relentlessly bullied. But as he grew older, his frame slowly filled out and he realized now he could hold his own in a fight against his bullies. Even though he now towered over all of his bullies, Marco did not want to fight, and he avoided joining any street gangs. But this seemed to only bring more trouble toward him. Slowly though, Marco also realized he made more money by fighting, and so he became an underground boxer. And of course, while all this is happening, his sister grew up, and she was now a grown woman. His sister began dating Ricardo, the heir to a mob family. And Ricardo took notice of Marco and his talents, but Marco refused to be associated with him, afraid of getting dragged into the mobster life. Finally though, Marco caved in when he was offered professional training. Over time, Marco became a much better boxer, and along with that, he became very roped into the family, until Ricardo showed his true colors when he asked Marco to kill a man in a boxing match, and he threatened Marco's sister if he didn't. So, of course, Marco did it, and he felt extreme regret, and he decided he needed to get out of this life. So, he went into a nightclub, killed Ricardo, and he fought his way out of the nightclub throughout all of Ricardo's goons with only a little bit of minor damage, which I just find dope. After he got out of the nightclub, he found that his sister was in a vineyard in Vinland, so he decided to hop on a train to meet her in the kingdom of Rondon, with his first stop being in Prehevel. But as you can guess, that's when he got roped into the Termina festival. His Moon Scorch form reflects how he feels on the inside, especially after killing a man. He feels like a giant, a hulking monster. So, that's what his Moon Scorch turns him into. With Marco out of the way though, the next character I want to talk about is August doesn't have much lore, because he's only seen like once or twice throughout the game. It's a pretty rare occurrence, but he is in Prehevel for a mission, and that mission is to kill the Kaiser. If you don't know who the Kaiser is, go check out my Fear and Hunger Termina lore video. Just scroll on my channel a little, it'll be close. But August is believed to be related to Ragnvaldr, who is one of the main characters in the first Fear and Hunger game. And Ragnvaldr was like a warrior hunter type thing, which August seems to be similar with. August sadly has no Moon Scorch form though, because he always dies before the end of the game no matter what. But the next character I want to talk about is Olivia is a mobster from the rival family that Marco was in. He is known by a lot of the characters in the game already due to his cruelty and violent nature. Also, he's known as Count Dragul. Ooh. One thing I find interesting about him though is he is one of the only contestants in the entirety of the Termina Festival who will actively seek out and kill the other contestants. It's really only you and the player yourself that do that. His Moon Scorch form reflects how evil and vulgar he is by turning him into a giant, slimy, grimy monster who will hurl insults at you. With Caligari out of the way though, the next character I want to talk about is Pav is an interesting character Because at first he seems very evil being a part of the Bremen army, which are like the bad guys, but it turns out he has a good reason for joining. He joined because as a young boy, the Kaiser's army burned his village down and killed his parents. So from that point forward, he decided to join the Bremen army in search of vengeance, and to make sure no one would have to suffer like he did. He sadly doesn't have a moon scorch form in the game though, because on day 2 night of the festival, he and the Kaiser will fight, leaving Pav dead or injured. And no matter what you do, he will die. With Pav out of the way though, the next character I want to talk about is... Tanaka came to the town of Prehevel from the Far East to profit off of the war. From a young age, Tanaka was raised to believe that being emotional meant being weak, so he avoids friendship and he works incredibly hard. His Moon Scorch form is incredibly fitting of all of this, with it being labeled Judgment, and it spouts off different motivational phrases like the grind never stops, to represent how overworked he is and how focused he is on work. With Tanaka out of the way, the next character I want to talk about is...
Come on please, the duck!
Henrik doesn't speak much about his background in the game, but we know that his life started in the kingdom of Rondon, when he was born to 2 tavern owners. And throughout his childhood, Henrik really wanted to be an artist, just of any kind, and he dreamed of being someone important someday. And so he grew up trying to be all these things, and he got mad when he failed. And of course, eventually, he ran out of money, had to go back to his family tavern. And this is where he had to cook out of necessity. But it turns out that he's actually a pretty good cook, and so the tavern became pretty well renowned. Henrik's reason for being the festival is they wanted to try all Prehevel's delicacies. And one thing about Henrik I didn't mention is that he is a womanizer and is pretty perverted. Henrik's Moonscorch form reflects how he wants to be, being aptly named the Gentleman, where he takes the role of Mayor of Prehevel, and he really wants to seem intelligent in this form. And refined. The next character I want to talk about though is... Levi's story actually starts in Prehevel. Levi was born and lived in Prehevel for the first part of his life. Levi lived in an abusive household where his father abused his mother. And one night, in a drunken rage, his father killed his mother. And then his father disappeared. All of this left Levi an orphan, and not long after being sent to an orphanage, he was forced to fight for the Eastern Union as a child soldier. With all of this stress in his life, he turned to heroin. Levi eventually though decided to leave the army and go back to Prehevel, and of course that's when the festival occurred. Levi's Moonscorch reveals how he really feels about himself, with him turning into a giant weeping scope to represent how all he's felt like for most of his life is just a gun to be used. The next character though that I want to talk about is... Karen was born to wealthy non-nobles, and so her and her family were shunned by the other Bremen nobles. She also had a fiery spirit though, and she loved to adventure. After the onset of the war though, her and her family became very easy scapegoats for the public to latch onto. And so a mob came to her home and they just burned it down. She was taken away by her nanny to keep her safe. Her and her nanny moved, but her parents still sent her money. But as Karen grew, she became more interested in human rights activism and protesting. Though during a protest, Karen was injured, and she woke in hospital, where she decided it was finally time to go back home to Bremen. After arriving at her old home though, she realized that her dad had actually died in the house fire, and her nanny that had raised her all these years had kidnapped her and extorted her parents for money. Karen decided that at that point on, she would become a journalist, and with all the news of the Kaiser and Prehevel, she decided to go there, thus joining the festival. Karen's Moonscorch form reveals how she feels about herself deep down, making her a Valkyrie type creature, which would typically carry soldiers away to paradise from battle. But instead she resembles more of a vulture, showing how she feels, though her journalism is taking advantage of war and soldiers' despair. The next character that we are going to talk about though is... Dan was born to members of the cult of Sylvian, with his parents neglecting him in place of their worship. Tragedy struck at only 13 years old, when his parents never came back from a ritual, leaving him orphaned. As an orphan, though, he found work apprenticing as a butler, and over time, Dan also grew feelings for the Baron's daughter that he butlered for. And the Baron offered Dan a trade. He would give him a modern medical education if he told him all he knew of Sylvian. With a modern medical education, Dan joined the front lines of the war, as a medic specifically, and eventually he returned home. But as he returned home, he found his new family sacrificed in an occult ritual. Dan decided to search for answers, and so he ended up in Prehevel, which of course led to him being part of the festival. Dan has a moon-scorched form, but it's pretty strange because Dan has a neutral soul, so he just moon-scorches into Pocket Cat, who's a servant of the moon god Rare. So that's just a little strange in my opinion. But with Dan out of the way, the next character we can talk about is Abella was born as the oldest of all of her siblings, but as she grew up, she saw everyone she loved taken away by war. She started studying engineering, though, and she joined the NIL, making arms and snares, and Abella made her way to Prehevel in search of the NIL's chief. Abella's moon-scorched form represents how she feels about herself, which makes her a hulking, mannish beast, which is how she feels being a mechanic in a predominantly male industry, which she feels makes her less feminine. If you can't tell, I really don't like Abella's lore that much, so I didn't go that much in detail. That's just me. The next character we're going to talk about, though, is Olivia was born to overbearing parents, and she spent most of her time cooped up inside. But she found an escape in learning about botany and nature along with her twin sister Ryla. Now, Ryla was the opposite of Olivia, and Ryla enjoyed going outside and being a lot more physical, but she still found time to do all this stuff for her sister. During high school, though, Olivia suffered multiple small strokes, leaving her bedridden, and her parents searched for religious healing for this, despite the pleas of her sister for them to find modern medicine. But it was too late, and Olivia was left paralyzed from the waist down for probably the rest of her life. Later on, though, Olivia and her sister went to college, both of them excelling in their classes, and her sister Ryla getting to participate in an exchange program with Bremen, much to Olivia's envy. But after they both graduated, Ryla traveled the world, till suddenly she was accused of treason against the Bremen country and sent to prison. After all of this, Olivia found stuff about how Ryla was heading to Prehevel after she left prison, which led Olivia there too in search of her sister, and then she obviously joined the festival unwillingly. Olivia's moon-scorched form is called the Mechanical Dance, and it represents how she feels about herself. She feels more mechanical than human after being stuck in her wheelchair this long, and she feels below her sister. The next character we're going to talk about, though, is Marina was born into a family of dark priests, with their father being the leader of Prehevel's dark priests. But the path to dark priesthood is incredibly cruel and grueling, so even though Marina was born male, her mother hid it so Marina would never have to endure the pain of dark priesthood. From then on, Marina was sent to the Vatican, where she learned occultism, eventually returning to Prehevel, where of course, per usual, she is caught up in the festival. Marina's moon-scorched form shows her head coming out of her genitalia to show her insecurity about her transgenderness, and her father is the cocoon on her back, with him seemingly controlling her like she has felt like he has all her life. With her out of the way, we're going to talk about a character very connected to her, and that character is Saint-Marie is a dark priest assistant from the Vatican City who was one of Marina's classmates and developed a parasocial relationship with her, and she stalked Marina. Her moon-scorched form is dysmorphia, and it repeats as radiating and how it will transform soon, showing Saint-Marie's radiating soul. Not too much to San Marie, so let's just move on to the next one, and that next character is... Osa was born in Abyssinia, which was a war-torn country in Africa. He decided to leave his family and pursue an education in spiritualism and religion. But soon he realized religion was used to control the masses, and he abandoned the education. From that point on, he decided to worship the old gods for his own gain, joining the Yellow Mages and their worship of Groggoroth. And he eventually ended up joining the Yellow Mages on a journey into the dungeons of Fear and Hunger, from the very first Fear and Hunger game. Everyone else on the journey there scattered though, leaving Osa to voyage forward alone. Eventually in the dungeons, he found the severed head of the leader of the Yellow Mages, Nasra, who told him to travel to Pre-Hevel for an important event of cosmic proportions, which of course, again, leads into the festival. Osa's Moonscorch form reflects his fear of being controlled, with a mind-controlling fungus that typically controls ants and other insects jutting out of his head. That is the just very basic story of each Fear and Hunger character though. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe, like. If this video gets fucking 10 likes, then I'll do a video on the first Fear and Hunger game and the lore, I guess, of that. But thank you for watching, and let's move to the outro song. Hey everybody, this is my outro song. I hope that you do sing along. I'm the Moth Maker, and I make content. Please give me money. I need money. Please subscribe. I don't have a dime. I have really, really bad rhymes. Please subscribe. This is the outro song. The outro song. The outro song. This is the Moth Maker outro song. Please subscribe. I don't have a dime. If you give me a little bit of your time, maybe subscribe and give me a dime. A dime, a dime, a dime, a rhyme. I got bars from Mars. Girls go to Jupiter to get more stupider. Boys go to Mars to get more bars. That's what I'm saying. My name's not Lars. My name is Mothmaker, and I take time to make these videos, and I spit bars, rhymes, and hymes, and lots of things. So please subscribe and have a good time. Bye.